Hi, this is Bill Gelman, site runner from Play NJ, here for another episode of Atlantic City Boardwalk Talk away from the boardwalk.
And I'm David Danzis, lead writer for Play NJ. And as Bill mentioned, we're thinking outside the box a little bit, although we're inside boxes, and we are doing a remote episode this week. And Bill, let's jump right into it because we've got some interesting stuff to talk about. And let's start with the king of sports betting, right? And that's the NFL and football and what's going on there. You and I have been talking a little bit about a forecast, a projection, if you will, that we think is pretty close to coming true. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what September sports betting might hold for New Jersey?
Okay. Well, we are on the verge, as we said in a previous video, of hitting $1 billion in monthly handle. We'll be the first legal sports betting destination in the U.S. to hit that number, shatter that number. And we got teased in December with 996 million. There was a little change in there. We don't care about the change. You round up, you can technically call it a billion. It's not a billion. But where the reality is, the way things are going, it seems very realistic that it could happen as soon as a little more than a week from now. Right, David?
Yeah. And we have a few reasons why we think this, right? And it's not just because online sports betting and online casinos help pay our bills. But we're really looking at what's happening and the trajectory of this market. And we know a couple of things about September already right off the bat, right? So the New England Patriots Tampa Bay Buccaneers game that was played on Sunday night was not only the most watched NFL regular season game in history, it was also the most bet on NFL regular season game in history. Right. So that bodes pretty well for that. We knew coming into this season from talking to a couple of sportsbook directors that engagement and interest had already been up compared to prior years. Right. And I think that speaks to a few things. One, obviously, we have a lot of operators here in New Jersey. Right. What are our numbers now? We have 22 online, right?
22 online and 12 retail sportsbooks.
And 12 retail, right? The 9 casinos and the 3 racetracks. So there's plenty of options. But I tend to believe that it's not just the amount of options, but I think, 3 years into this, customers are more familiar with the sports books. They're more familiar with the mechanism of sports betting, and they're not as apprehensive to get involved anymore because it's now widely accepted and more mainstream, right? I mean, you can't watch a sporting event, no matter where it's being broadcast, without seeing commercial after commercial after commercial for a sports book.
That is correct. See a lot of Jamie Foxx.
Yeah, a lot of Jamie Foxx. So people now, I think we've reached that point where people are comfortable just jumping on their phone and betting and talking about it. It's not sort of, there's not a novelty to it. There's not a curiosity around it. There's not an uncertainty around it anymore. It's a mature market. So I think all of that bodes well for that $1 billion handle month. Here's the question, though. Will 1 billion handle be a one-off? Will it just happen, one time or maybe 2 or 3 times? Or is that something that's going to start to become the new normal? Will we see $1 billion months in other growing states like Pennsylvania or Michigan or even Nevada if they eventually, go all out with online? Will we see that? Or is this just something that New Jersey is benefiting from now as a result of circumstances, i.e. New York not having online up and running yet? Or is this New Jersey? What do you think?
Yeah, well, I think New York is definitely a big part of it because we've spoken to FanDuel in the past, and they confirmed to us that about 20% of their business, just FanDuel's business, is coming from New Yorkers, which makes sense because FanDuel Sportsbook is right on the other side of the tunnel, George Washington Bridge, whatever way you come into New Jersey. So you have that FanDuel recognition up there. Two, New York should have had it keeps dragging their feet. So by now, those New Yorkers, even if they were to get mobile sports betting, all these players are established with New Jersey sports books. And so it's routine for them. They, I've seen videos where New Yorkers are actually taking the subway in every day to get their bets in.
I've seen it with my own eyes.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, we know what's happening. It's not an urban myth. I've been in Secaucus and seen, people getting off the train from the city and the sports book is open in their phone. So yeah, I think New York is a big part of that.
Yeah,
Let's shift a little bit, and we'll talk about another sport that doesn't draw as much betting interest as football, but surprisingly does pretty well here in New Jersey. And part of that is because we are surrounded by three big market teams, right? We have the two New York teams, the Yankees and the Mets, and we have the Phillies in Philadelphia. So we have big market established teams, and I think that helps the betting market here. But we're in the MLB postseason now. Full disclosure, this is the morning after my heart was broken last night, and my Yankees were easily defeated in a one-game playoff. So the Yankees are no longer up there with the betting favorites, at least here in New Jersey. Who's at the top of the odds right now? Who are the books saying has the best chances to win the 2021 Fall Classic?
Well, before I answer that question, I want to say I wasn't sure you were going to bring it up. I didn't think you had it in you, especially because you got knocked out by the Red Sox. So I give you kudos there for being able to talk about it. Rough loss. As a Philadelphia fan myself, I feel your pain. I've been waiting 10 years for my team to get back in the playoffs. So at least you can say you had playoffs. But to answer your question, if you look at DraftKings right now, the defending champion LA Dodgers are the favorite. They're plus 390. But they have to go through the wild card round. They had won over 100 games, and yet they got to play the Cardinals for a chance to advance in a sudden death game. And that game is taking place. We won't know the result as we're recording because it's taking place tonight. So maybe they're still in it. Maybe the Cardinals pulled an upset. The Cardinals have the longest odds at the moment to win the World Series. So, and to me, the biggest shocker is the San Francisco Giants, who have Gabe Kapler as their manager. Gabe Kapler, who was the former Phillies manager.
It's all coming back to the Phillies now. I see. Go ahead.
Yeah, I had to loop it back in. We talked about your Yankees. Now it's the Phillies. The Phillies, they couldn't do nothing. It doesn't matter who their manager is. Kapler goes out to San Francisco. Magically, he's coach of the year material. So it's we
don't give betting advice, and we don't give picks and tips and stuff like that. I will tell you, I don't have a whole lot of faith in the Giants. I wouldn't put my money on them. They remind me a lot of teams like the 2001 Mariners, right? Who are just kind of came out of nowhere. There's talent there. I just don't think they have it in them. You look at some of the other NL teams that are still in it, the Braves, the Brewers, the Dodgers. They've all got experience. They're battle tested. They've got pitching. I really like Milwaukee's pitching. I think they're going to go deep. On the other side, my Yanks played in the toughest division in baseball this year, and I think probably one of those two teams are likely going to represent the American League in the World Series. Maybe some of that is some Astros hate. I don't shy away from that. But Tampa Bay looks they're just a complete baseball team. They don't have a hole. Boston last night, that was the Boston that I think we saw 2 years ago, and for some reason didn't show up last year, COVID, whatever the reason might be, Cora, blah, blah, blah. Boston didn't surprise anybody, at least not me, by getting as far as they did this year. They're a good ball club. They've got good ball players. So I see Boston or Tampa. I don't know. The favorites I'm always spooked by favorites, and repeat champions is such a rarity in professional sports these days, that, even if the Dodgers had the best odds going into it, that's hard to live up to, man. So, all right, let's move off of sports betting a little bit. And our show is titled Atlantic City Boardwalk Talk. So let's talk a little bit about the Atlantic City Boardwalk and what's happening at the Boardwalk casinos. I think one of the big things that we just have to acknowledge, because it is a huge deal, not just for this market, but I think just in terms of New Jersey's role as a destination in general, is the addition of Nobu coming to Caesars Atlantic City. If you're not familiar with Nobu is a high-end Japanese-themed restaurant, hotel, hospitality entity that was first introduced in Las Vegas at Caesars Palace, and has now expanded to a couple of other, high-profile tourist destinations. And Atlantic City was chosen as sort of one of these expansion locations, if you will. So the Caesars Atlantic City, which is owned by Caesars Entertainment. Caesars Entertainment has a partnership with Nobu, so they're going to put in both a hotel tower, where they're going to convert one of the existing towers into a Nobu themed tower, and also introduce a Nobu restaurant. Again, I think both of these things are significant, not just for Atlantic City and Caesars, but New Jersey in general. I mean, New Jersey sort of gets lost in the shadow of New York and Philly as being a go-to dining / hospitality destination. And I will tell you, I think, especially North Jersey and right outside of Philly, some of the best restaurants you're going to find in the Northeast are in those areas. I mean, so just being able to enhance that portfolio is great. And it's a big win for Atlantic City. That part of the boardwalk right now really seems to be a focus, right? So for the last two and a half years, the north end of the boardwalk was getting a lot of love and a lot of attention and a lot of focus with Ocean Casino Resort and Hard Rock, and what was happening and is still happening at the former Showboat Casino, now Showboat Hotel. Resorts up their game a little bit, right? So the north end of the boardwalk was getting a lot of love there for a little while. Now we're moving into the center of the boardwalk, right? So Caesars is doing some stuff. We've been talking a lot about Bally's, and there's a couple of things that have happened to Bally's since the last time we talked, and I'll let you take it from there.
Yeah, so there's a new high limits lounge is going to be debuting. We were told part of it will be open in October, but it'll be full go. Plan is for November. There's a new Asian restaurant right near the high limits lounge that replaced, I believe it was Noodle Village.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so there's that. And unfortunately, some people are unhappy with it. Harry's, which is off the boardwalk on the ground level, that closed at the end of September. There's rumored to be a new indoor outdoor entertainment complex that's going to be replacing that space. We don't know the name or the details, but it's just another example of how Bally's keeps on upgrading the property. A property that was pretty much, I don't think you'll disagree with me here, the property was pretty much ignored prior to former Twin Rivers taking it over. And now they're just like, it's almost like by the time they're done, it's going to be unrecognizable property.
Yeah, I mean, I'll use a softer term. I'll use the term neglected. I don't know that it was ignored, right? Because let's not forget, before Bally's was sold, Caesars Entertainment, who owned the property, they did put a lot of money into the Sportsbook at the Wild Wild West. There was a focus on the Wild Wild West and making that an entertainment destination, especially for a younger crowd. So I don't know that it was necessarily ignored. Neglected, absolutely.
Okay,
right?
I mean, neglected.
Yeah. So I like that softer term. But it's definitely getting the love and attention that it so sorely needs. And we know that Bally's is also, renovating the hotel rooms, which, again, something that it was in desperate need of. They're going to get some new suites in there, which is, again, you need that, right? You got to be able to compete with the Oceans and the Hard Rocks and the Borgatas of Atlantic City. And Bally's just didn't have that room inventory to compete. I mean, they had the location and the view, and that's great. That only gets you so far. Right. So I think Bally's recognized that, and they're putting some money into upgrading those hotel rooms. That's fantastic. I do want to just say one thing about Harry's Oyster Bar closing. The family that owned Harry's or ran Harry's owned several other restaurants in Atlantic City, including Doc's Oyster House and Knife and Fork, and the newly opened Doherty's Steakhouse and Raw Bar in resorts. So you can still get that same sort of culinary experience in other places in Atlantic City. But Harry's was a great location right there at the center of the boardwalk. That courtyard right there, I mean, that's just fantastic for live entertainment. I myself had a lot of good nights, watching live music out there, and Harry's is going to be missed. I have full faith in this Bally's team that they're going to put something comparable, if not hopefully better, in that space that will really help improve that area of the boardwalk, because it's such a critical place, and it really needs to be a focus. It needs to be important, and I have faith that Bally's is going to do the right thing. Before we leave the center of the boardwalk, there's a plot of vacant land right there on the boardwalk, and not that anything is going to happen by next summer, right? We're not going to see cranes and bulldozers and construction in that vacant lot, but something's happening there, right, Bill?
Yes, something is happening there. There's I believe,
And
$50,000.
just in case anybody's unclear, what space are we talking about?
We're talking about the space formerly known as Trump Plaza. I don't know if we're allowed to use the word Trump.
I thought we were done talking about Trump Plaza.
It's a story that'll never die. Correct me if if I have the amount incorrect, but I believe there's a $50,000 study being put together to figure out the best use for that piece of land. I mean, I remember coming in from the Atlantic City Expressway all the time. That used to be the biggest eyesore because it would be the first thing you would see as you're coming in the main entrance off the expressway into Atlantic City. So now it's like, what happened to the building? You can't, it's smack dab in the middle of the boardwalk, and you can't mess around with it. You got to come up, whatever the genius ideas they come up with, they can't get it wrong. You get like one time to fix this.
So. Yeah. And so here's where the cynic in me is going to come out a little bit. And like I said, I'm salty this morning because of what happened last night in my baseball game. So maybe I'm going to go hard on the cynicism here. During my time with my former employer as a newspaper reporter, I can't tell you how many studies I read and saw and reviewed about what should happen with this parcel of land or with Atlantic City as a whole, or what needs to change in order to bring Atlantic City back to life. I had a drawer full and boxes next to my desk filled with paid for studies of things that should happen in Atlantic City. Listen, this isn't complicated, people. You need something that will draw people 365 days a year. This isn't to me, it's not complicated, right? With all of these ideas about, I don't even want to get into specifics because I don't want to say something that's going to rub anybody the wrong way. My point is, there's not a whole lot of those options, right? There's not a whole lot of things that fit that bill, right? Of a 365 day a year destination. It's a pretty limited list, right? So you're starting from a list that's this big. We're not talking about infinite possibilities here. So to me, the money, listen, I know the people getting the money. I know where the grant money is going. The people in charge of this study are totally capable and deserving of doing this. My thing is, they're not going to come up with an answer or a solution that hasn't already been thought of or discussed, right? We're not reinventing the wheel in Atlantic City. So my hope is that this isn't something that drags on and $50,000 turns into $250,000 and turns into $500,000, and we're 10 years down the road and that land is still vacant, like the vacant sands lot, right? I hope that's not what happens. The cynic in me says it's Atlantic City and that's what's going to happen, and that's terrible.
It's a shame that that's how it
The
plays
optimist in me says, I think the city and the people in charge and the people making these decisions recognize how important this is and how critical it is to not only get it right, but to get it done quickly. This can't be a 5-year thing. This can't be a 10-year thing. There has to be something in that vacant boardwalk lot by 2025. I mean, there has to be. It's inexcusable if there's not, and it's a complete and total failure if there's not. And I don't think that's going to happen, but it's Atlantic City, and we've seen this movie before.
Yeah, and I mean, you look at it. There's 3 big parcels of land on the boardwalk, and it's almost like you don't know which one's going to get filled first, because you mentioned the former Sands lot. They had years ago they had a major implosion, knocking the former Sands down. You haven't had a word with that space, and a couple of years ago the Atlantic Club space was purchased, and we haven't heard a word from that owner. So you have, you want to make it a 365-day destination like you talked about, and here you have 3 pieces of land that you can do some nice things with, and you're left wondering if anything will ever happen to any of these pieces of land.
And again, going back to my days as a newspaper reporter, the problem is there's too many cooks in the kitchen. There's too many people who have a say or have input or who have influence into what happens in these locations and how these decisions are made. And yes, while it's great to have a diversity of idea and opinion, sometimes all that does is clog up the machine, right? It slows down the progress that's needed to get things going. So I'm hopeful, but I'm also realistic.
Right. So
I hope something goes there. I really do. And I hope it happens sooner rather than later.
But we won't set any lines as to when or
no. I'm because, listen, if we're going to start setting lines, we still need to do it for when that $100 million water park is going to get built.
I was wondering
before we go crazy on that one, let's finish up with kind of what's been in the headlines recently. We kind of had a unusual story from Borgata.
Yeah, there was I'll let you explain it more since you wrote it, but it was there was a whole little poker controversy about a poker player went to Borgata, he checked in his room, he said some words he probably shouldn't have, and it created a whole mess between the Borgata, the player, and we just got word on settlement between the two parties. I'll let you explain more about the story since you're the man behind the words.
Yeah, this was kind of one of those, just piqued your curiosity, or you saw this and you're like, what's going on here? So long story short, Poker Pro checks into the Borgata in 2019 ahead of a tournament. Desk clerk asks if he would like a room on a high floor or a low floor, and the guy made a offhand comment about if he jumped, would it matter if he was on a low floor or a high floor. He ended up getting a visit from security after he checked into his room. They escorted him to get a psychiatric evaluation to make sure that he wasn't suicidal. He cleared, no problems. When he gets back to his hotel room, all his stuff's backed up, and Borgata tells him he's not welcome back. All right. So the guy ends up suing Borgata, because he's a poker pro. He makes his money and his living playing in tournaments, and Borgata has great poker tournaments. So he sues Borgata over this lifetime ban and over the money that he would have theoretically lost from not being able to participate. It's not so much the case that kind of caught my interest as much as kind of why would you do that, right? The world we live in today, for better or worse, people pay more attention to comments like that than they would have in previous years. And then you add to the fact, and I don't know if this gentleman knew this or not, and it's irrelevant, but it is relevant in some ways. But just a few months prior to that, there was a young man who found a way to break one of the windows at Borgata and jump to his death. And he was a young man, and no one truly knows what happened other than his friends and family. And I just don't understand why that would ever be a thing. And then, this guy doubled down and sued the casino for them basically being the ones to say, like, that's not cool, man. You can't do that here. Listen, good for him. He got some money. I don't know what Borgata was supposed to do in that situation. I don't know what any casino was supposed to do in that situation. Crazier things have happened, right, Bill?
Right.
I'm shrugging my shoulders because is this a serious story? Is this a cautionary tale? Is this a weird New Jersey story? I mean, I don't know, but it happened. We don't know how much this poker pro ended up getting in the settlement. We just know the two sides amicably agreed to settle their differences. Who knows? But I think the moral of the story is don't joke about jumping from casinos.
Yeah, don't make any jokes when you check in at Atlantic City Casino is what it comes down to.
Listen, these employees are going through enough junk right now. They don't need people making jokes about jumping from hotel windows. All right. I'm going to leave it at that. This has been our Atlantic City Boardwalk talk from our remote locations in our respective bunkers. Our next episode, we will be back in an Atlantic City casino. Remember, if you like what Bill and I are doing here, make sure you hit that like button at the bottom of the video. Please subscribe to our videos so that we can keep doing this and keep you guys informed about what's going on in Atlantic City and New Jersey. And Bill, I'm going to go cry somewhere in a corner about my Yankees losing.
All right. I'll let you do that, but Jane, you should be upbeat though. Your Jets won, so you can't. It wasn't a terrible week for you. So just think Jets when you think of the Yankees.
Great.
Hey, my team has lost 3 in a row. You have something.
We have the same record, Bill. My Jets and your Eagles have the same record. So I don't know if that says more about my team or yours, but that's where we are right now.
This can be a whole nother episode. Well, we'll cut it off here, I guess.
All right, guys. Thanks for tuning in.